In this video, I want to talk about real versus fake. It's always the end goal to get a realistic looking render. Now, of course, when you go into your render options, if you're trying to do a cartoon render or contour render, those aren't things that you necessarily need to make look realistic. But when you're doing a high quality, high aspect ratio render of something like a vehicle, like our 2010 Camaro assembly model that we've been using, that is very important to make it look realistic. When you're talking about real as opposed to fake, you really need to focus on materials. The scene is very important. The interaction between your model and the environment is very important, but your material choice is just as important. You can spend loads and loads of time dealing with applying materials and selecting materials and trying to tweak the material values. But if you just make the proper choice, that can go a long way. And I want to show you one example. The Camaro model is a high gloss black plastic. In most cases, in a lot of the scenes, we wouldn't have noticed that there's a real difference between this and maybe a black paint. One very important aspect is that the black plastic is a single color. Now, we don't have any specular spread, we don't have a secondary color to change the way the reflections look. As opposed to a black paint, the black paint is much deeper, much richer, and it gives a different feel for those reflections. Let's take a look at compare and options between these two different items. The scene is the same, but you can tell a drastic difference in the way one vehicle looks as opposed to the other. The one on the right side, the B side, looks more fake. The plastic material doesn't look realistic to what we would actually see, whereas the darker, richer black of the painted car gives you a more realistic feel for what we're looking at here. Let's go ahead and use the spotlight option as well. So here you can see certain aspects of the interaction between the car and the background scene don't give a very good indication that this is a real product. So spend the extra time playing with your options, taking a look at the render region, really looking at what materials you're choosing, especially when you have a material such as the plastic or the paint on a car, because that is a large material. It goes over a lot of curves, a lot of edges, and it's going to be a huge factor in how the ambient light, the reflections, the spotlights, the reflections of your scene, the environment itself, how they interact with your parts. Take as much time as you can. Obviously, we don't have infinite amount of time to spend on these things, but if you are doing all your renders within SOLIDWORKS, you're not using a standalone program, then you want to make sure that you get these materials right. As I mentioned in earlier videos, we do have Luxology materials available if you are a current subscription member. You can log into the SOLIDWORKS customer portal, you can go to your downloads area and get access to Luxology materials. Inside there, there are a lot of great materials that you can apply to vehicles, such as carbon fibers. There's a retro red, which is a really nice metallic. These are not just red colors, but these are separate colors, different paints, very rich paints. There's a rubber tire. Now, this rubber tire tread is a very realistic looking tread. It actually has material on the sidewall. Just going into and getting access to those materials can make a huge difference in the end result of your final render. I would say when you're going through the process, the modeling environment obviously takes a good bit of time, but you could spend 20 hours plus setting up various renders, selecting your materials, getting all your lighting right, and actually going through some of these final renders. When you have a computer that can process these renders very quickly, if you have a large render farm or if you're using network rendering and you can get access to the processing power of many different computers, you can do these high quality renders. You can get them knocked out pretty quick. The difference between someone that takes 5 minutes to set up a model to render and someone that takes 5 hours is very drastic. Now, it might seem like a lot of wasted time, but if you need a realistic output, if this is what you're using for marketing collateral, if you're trying to make it look as if this product has actually been produced, or you have prototypes of this and so on, spending that extra time getting that information just right can mean the difference between landing a client and having someone walk away from the product altogether. Spend the time and make sure that you don't leave any stone unturned.